So it is currently 1:12 in the morning and I am in a burn it all to the ground mood. So we're going to talk about it. And this is going to be unscripted because I don't usually use scripts anyways, but for hot topics like this, I try to. But I haven't had the energy to write the script and I want to talk about it. And the it in question is book banning a certain section of Project 2025 and the implications of what all that means for books and also the LGBT community. But before we get into it, let's go over the definition of some terms that people seem to forget the meaning of words for. So our first term is book banning. What is book banning? Book banning is the act of restricting or removing books from public access, such as libraries, schools, or bookstores, based on their content. So what does that mean? That means that every one of you who likes to try and get books removed from schools and then turns around and tries to say you're not a book banner, yes, you are. By definition of what book banning means, yes, you are. Also, to clarify, that is the actual definition of book banning. So trying to say that they're not going to come for your books because your books aren't in schools or whatever, the minute they take them out of, it starts with schools, then it goes to libraries, then it goes to bookstores, and then it goes to like book burnings on the extreme end. But we're not going to touch on that today. Now, our next definition has to do with pornography, which is the printed or visual material containing the explicit description or display of sexual organs or activity intended to stimulate erotic rather than aesthetic or emotional feelings. And I already know this video is probably going to get censored because I said the P word, but calling it corn just makes my skin crawl. So, YOLO. Now, keeping those definitions in mind, let's address this section of an article by PEN America. Project 2025 wants to define LGBTQ plus content as porn and treat librarians like criminals. Project 2025 is upfront about its intent to equate LGBTQ content in children's books and in school curricula with pornography and to treat making such content accessible as a crime. Already, 3 states have passed laws that would treat librarians as criminals for refusing to pull books from their shelves, and 17 states are considering or have considered similar legislation this year. Meanwhile, PEN America has recorded thousands of instances of book bans since 2021 occurring in almost every state. All of this has made life more dangerous for librarians. I have been called a porn peddler in an open meeting, one librarian told PEN America last year. One person on Facebook has said I should be stoned to death. Now, some of you might be like, well, where does it say that? Well, let me pull that up for you. Pornography, manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance, is not a political Gordian knot inextricably binding up disparate claims of free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. It has no claim to First Amendment protection. Its purveyors are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. Moving along, we're going to discuss the highlighted parts of this report by Millie Libraries. I 100% recommend going and reading the whole report. I think it's only like 5 to 10 pages long, so it's not a long read, but it breaks down exactly what they're trying to do. But this part and the next part I'm going to show you, I think, are incredibly important to keep in mind when you're trying to say that they're not trying to come for your books. I am only going to read the highlighted parts, but feel free to pause, screenshot, whatever you need to do if you want to read the parts that aren't highlighted as well. Project 2025 makes claims that pornography, normally defined as content that is sexually explicit and designed to cause sexual arousal, is actually manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children. You can find this on page 5 of Project 2025. The mandate calls for pornography to be outlawed, and the people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. It further specifies that educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. By conflating pornography with transgenderism, the Heritage Foundation attempts to co-opt a term with a distinct definition not to increase awareness and understanding, but to leverage its fear factor to incite parents and others. By sexualizing gender and K-12 students, Project 2025 stoops to generating fear where there should be trust and condoning, even encouraging, the mistreatment and misunderstanding of minoritized communities and the targeting of librarians and teachers. By suggesting schools and public libraries are purveyors of pornography, the Heritage Foundation uses the word pornography's fear factor to vilify respected members of communities, spreading distrust, anxiety, and outrage. Book bans, censoring lessons, self-censoring library and classroom materials, mandated curricular changes, and vague legislative language outlawing topics and teaching styles are causing exhausted librarians and teachers to leave their jobs and often their professions as well. They're trying to criminalize LGBT and LGBT themed things and stuff that has LGBT content in it. And they're doing it under the guise of trying to convince you that porn and LGBT themed things such as books are the same. Now, if you go on Pen America right now, there's a list of banned LGBT books, and 3 books on there are And Tango Makes 3, When Aiden Became a Brother, and Uncle Bobby's Wedding. There is nothing sexual in any of those books. The only thing that's in them is that there are LGBT characters. They are aimed at elementary school children. And In Tango Makes 3 is based on a true story that legit happened, where these 2 male penguins raised a baby chick. Moving on from that, I just wanted to touch on this really quickly. Project 2025 is trying to eliminate the Institute of Museum and Library Services for state libraries and public libraries. Again, I'm just going to read the highlighted parts. Feel free to pause, screenshot, do whatever you got to do. Again, I also highly recommend going and reading this whole report. But the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 is not written in a vacuum. It is consistent with their annual budget priorities, including the elimination of the Institute of Museum and Library Services. The Heritage Foundation's budget blueprints for multiple fiscal years, including 2020, 2022, and 2023, have consistently proposed eliminating the IMLS. The proposed elimination of the IMLS would have far-reaching negative consequences for the library ecosystem. The loss of federal funding would end a wide range of programs, including library workforce development, technology upgrades, and community outreach initiatives. Libraries, particularly those in underserved and rural areas, would struggle to maintain current levels of service without federal support. This could lead to reduced hours, staff layoffs, and the elimination of important programs and services. These losses would disproportionately affect low-income and marginalized populations who rely on library services for access to information and opportunities for lifelong learning. IMLS supports state libraries, special libraries, and tribal libraries, which serve unique populations with specific needs. The loss of the IMLS funding would undermine the ability of those libraries to offer services and resources to their communities. So tell me again that they're not trying to come for books, because they are, and they have been. And there's an entire demographic of people that refuses to acknowledge that this stuff's even going on. And yeah, they might start with LGBT books, but eventually they'll come for yours too.